Welcome in, everybody, into the Go 24/7 live show. My name is Bryce Koon. Thanks so much for tuning in as we get ready to recap a little bit of what LSU was able to do against this Army team. What does it mean? How much can we really look into it? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you have technical difficulties, let us know in the comments. Got questions, comments, concerns that you want us to get to about this team as we head into the bye week. Make sure to like the video wherever you're watching this, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on YouTube, or if you're watching on Twitter. If you want to get that comment in, head over to our YouTube page. Let's talk first off. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this game. If you've paid attention to the Go 24/7 site, you've seen obviously our coverage of what we were able to, gather. And, I'll kind of start with this. This is where I'll start with. Obviously, it's an inferior opponent on paper. Obviously, this is a team that, Army's, already inferior if they were truly running the triple option. And they're already kind of behind that eight ball still in what they're trying to do, offensively and move to more of a modern version of the triple option. That being said, we asked the question of what can we really take away, from this game. And I think in one second here, I think that we've got a couple people commenting. We take a look at the takeaways from the win over Army. This is kind of where I sit with this. Inferior opponent, you still have to take care of business. You still have to go out there and execute. You still have to go out there and, as Brian Kelly has mentioned, and several players, execute your plan and process. You have to continue to work to achieve what you want to. This was a stepping stone game. This was a game where you're not going to go in here and say, okay, yeah, Trey Holly led the team in rushing. He's the number one back. No, no, no. But what you are going to say is this offense is still really, really good. The offense doesn't play down to level of competition that they, might have in previous seasons. What also is this group doing? Defensively, they're showing signs of potentially doing a couple things that we'll talk about in a second here, but they're trending in the right direction as they get into this bye week. So I think overall, with what this team is able to do, it's encouraging to see from a standpoint of the buy-in, from a standpoint of where this team can go here in 2023, because a lot of people had written LSU off, especially after the loss to Ole Miss. And look, the SEC is crazy. There's a lot of things that are kind of nuts about what's going on in college football, and so there's still obviously a lot to play for. So make sure you get your comments in as we kind of talk about tonight's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let's start with this. Offensively, what can we take away from the Army game? Like I mentioned earlier, this is a group, this is a program that I think has understood what it means to play at a championship level offensively. You might say, now, Bryce, it's Army. And look, I get that. I understand that. You have to execute. You have to go out there and execute your game plan. There still are 11 other players on the side of the football that are trying to stop you from doing what you want to do, no matter the caliber of player that they might be. It's still a hard game. LSU went out there and did that. Does that mean they're going to score 62 points against everyone they play? No. But I see my man James Everett in there, talking about that Alabama game. He says, call me crazy if you want, but I don't believe that Alabama can hold us under 40. This offense is still really, really good. 7th straight game for this group with 500 yards total or more. It doesn't matter who you line up against, folks. That's something that's really, really hard to do. So, really excited to see where this offense can go and what more can they do, because Jay Daniels talked about this a couple weeks ago. There is another level that they can achieve. There is another level that they can get to. And I think a lot of folks in the media are like, yeah, okay. Maybe some fans are like, yeah, whatever. But we're starting to see maybe it's not a statistical number that they're going to hit, or maybe it's not, I don't know. Maybe it's just certain things that, maybe they're going to do. But maybe what this is an offense that's putting up those numbers, but at such a consistent level, like my man here, James said, that nobody can stop them. Maybe that's the next level of what this LSU offense can do. Now, you take everything with a grain of salt against Army, obviously, but in all seriousness, we're going to see what this group can do going forward. I'm excited to kind of watch it as well. Just an overall kind of growth, maturity of this offense, the diversity that they have and the weapons that they can go to. I think it makes this group one of the more special ones, if not the, most special. We'll use that in the entire country. It's going to be very, very fun to watch. Want to take a look defensively here because this is where I start to kind of get in the comments into the on our message boards. Make sure you join Go 24/7 if you haven't already, and a lot of what we're talking about defensively. Let's go back to the Missouri week against Missouri in that first half. A lot of fans were like, "Oh no, here we go, here we go. This is not good. This is not what you want to see." And a lot of folks were concerned with going into that halftime of that game thinking to themselves, what do we do from here? What happens? Obviously, we knew they had brought Pete Jenkins in. Fast forward, something that Brian Kelly has mentioned since the beginning of the post-game presser against Florida State down in Orlando that we were in attendance for is this group had to learn how to play aggressive, but also disciplined. Reckless, abandoned, running around with a chicken head, with a head like a chicken cut off, or whatever the saying is. I butchered that right there. That's fine. Whatever it is, bringing the two concepts together of playing fast and physical, but also not playing so out of control that it puts you in situations that hurt you. And I think it's fair to say this is what that group had done up until this point of the season. The Ole Miss game is a prime example. You wanted to be really, really aggressive in that football game. What you did not want to do is allow your over aggressiveness to be taken advantage of. Ole Miss did that. In the first half against Missouri, Missouri did that. The second half, a lot of things changed. I think that one of the biggest things that we've seen out of this group, and we saw it again on Saturday night, once again, I know on paper it's an opponent that you should dominate. But folks, let's not get it wrong here. Putting up a goose egg on the scoreboard against anyone is hard. This was still a Division I football program that you were playing that, like I said, had 11 other players facing your Tigers that wanted to score, that wanted to do something. In this game, when you can keep somebody at 0 in any statistical category, regardless of the talent level, that is a win in your book. That is a feather in the cap of what this program is working towards. So the title of obviously the video, and we've talked about this, is dominating going into the bye week. The thumbnail that says, is LSU trending in the right direction? Ever since that second half against Missouri, I think that we have to really be honest with ourselves and say, we knew this wasn't, and I said this wasn't going to be a group that was going to turn into a 1980s version of the Bears. But what it was going to be is a group that continued to mature and was able to find ways, whether obviously we know now getting back to the basics, probably some come to Jesus meetings in that defensive line group of guys needing to play up to the standard that LSU calls them to and up to their own personal standard because a lot is being placed on this front seven. Harold Perkins settling in wherever Harold Perkins needs to be. All of these things coming together. And I think it's safe to say as LSU gets into the bye week that this defense is trending in a positive direction. You were able to shut down an Auburn team that, yes, leaves a lot to be desired offensively. But I don't know if you guys realized this is a team that went toe-to-toe, scored 14 points on Ole Miss. I know that doesn't say a lot, but they were in that game. This is a hard sport. This is something that's really, really hard to do consistently week in and week out. And ever since, regardless of the name across for them, regardless of the color of the jersey, LSU has been in a position where defensively they've been able to be opportunistic with turnovers, which up until 3 weeks ago, if we're honest with ourselves, they really hadn't done a lot in the turnover category, in the turnover department. They have not been able to do a lot. So I think that as we continue to get into this bye week, we see this team go play, obviously get Alabama in Tuscaloosa. There's a lot to like about that matchup that we're going to talk about next Sunday and really get in depth on. And I think it's going to be a really, really fun show that you should make sure you're a part of. All these things being said, what can you take away from a win at Army? You can take away that we went in and handled business like elite teams do against inferior competition. That should make you feel good. Because we could have come out of this game and we could have sat there and said to ourselves, you know what? They only won this game 38-14. They didn't dominate like they should have been. And a lot of fans would have gotten called crazy for that, for complaining about a 24-point win. But I think there's a lot of merit in saying if LSU, and a lot of the fans feel like this, and I agree with them, is going to be the elite championship level team that you want them to be, whether or not they get to the playoff this year, which is a different conversation, whether or not they get to Atlanta this year. If as a program you are going to set the standard, these are the type of wins that you have to have when that type of opponent comes across your face. LSU did that. I was impressed with that. I think defensively, it's going to be something that we really, really see this group continue just to incrementally improve upon. That for me is going to be something that I really hope to see. I also think that we need to talk about, and I'm replying to a couple of these comments here. You know, one of the biggest thing is we have to ask ourselves defensively, the front seven is something that I've been impressed with. I think that they're continuing to see more playable depth in big time situations. There's levels to that. Okay. So coming into the season, you thought, Mason Smith was going to be a big part of it. We thought, and we've now seen Mekhi Wingo is, but guys like Jacoby and Gillard that we talked about in fall camp, guys like, Jordan Jefferson, these guys that are kind of making, I don't want to say a name for themselves, but showing their worth that when you put them in to rotate on a second or third down in Tuscaloosa in 2 weeks, the talent drop off, the work ethic drop off is not going to be as drastic as it might be for other teams that have to go rotate defensive linemen. LSU's trending that way. And that's another positive side that I'm seeing just from a mentality standpoint of this team. Here's the concern, and we talk about this. What is going on with the LSU defensive backs? If you did not know, Zy Alexander was injured in last night's game. Could barely put some weight on the ankle that he was dealing with. They believe it's a lower body extremity of what they're going with. That being said, what happens with the LSU defensive backs going forward is going to be a major storyline heading into this bye week. I think it's something that we kind of have to address. I think it's something that we have to kind of sit there and think to ourselves, what does this group look like? So Deuce Chestnut not currently with the team. We know that. Denver Harris, Brian Kelly reported afterwards, and you could catch it on our boards as well, not available. No reason specified. You don't obviously want to speculate about certain things, but I think that we can all sit here and say not available without an explanation isn't really a good sign. So you don't have those. You know that Ashton Stamps is still hurt. Ashton Stamps, the young freshman player. You know, obviously, Zy Alexander's hurt. They've moved Sage Ryan to cornerback. That's a guy that's going to be playing there. Outside of that, what does it look like? It's a lot of young, inexperienced players, and I won't even say a lot of. It's a couple. So I think that depending on what happens, here's a couple scenarios here. Depending on what happens with this group altogether, and the names Deuce Chestnut and Denver Harris right now, for me, have not shown that they can be counted on, whether it's a mental thing, whether it is a physical thing. I don't want to say physical because I don't want to bash guys for having injuries if that's what it is. But if this is a mental off the field type of issue, we can't count on you 7 weeks into the season. So I think that that's something we have to sit here and be honest with ourselves about. If 7 weeks in, we're still dealing with buy-in and this type of thing, that's a problem. We can't trust to put you on the field. And so if that is what's happening, and like I said, you don't want to speculate, if that's what's going on, then I applaud the staff for saying, you know what, it puts us in a real bind here. But what it does, and let's see, what it does for me is it lets me know that this staff is not trying to let potential bad eggs ruin the whole batch. This is a really good football team. And you can't allow toxicity in the locker room, toxicity in your program, even at the expense of having a weak potential group, which it's not potentially. This is a weak group. You're having guys potentially play out of position. You're not going to let it derail what you have going and what this is going and what we've talked about. It's an LSU team that is trending in the right direction. Obviously we know they need help from Ole Miss. They need, help from Georgia. And, LSU fans are going to be massive Georgia fans when Ole Miss heads to Athens in November. But if you take care of business and you still have a chance to go to Atlanta, which this team does, you can't allow, whether or not, honestly, you are having a chance to play for postseason aspirations, you cannot let that infiltrate your program. So I applaud the coaching staff for being able to do that. And like I said, I don't know whether what the exact issue is. I don't know what exact problems are. I do applaud that. So what's going on with LSU DBs? Who's going to be available to play? We know Sage Ryan's going to be one of those guys. I think that we legitimately, Ryan Robinson, the former walk-on, he got some run last night in the game. Is Javian Toviano, who was kind of recruited as a nickel corner, is that a guy that we're going to have to see step up? Is that a guy that we're going to have to see, hey, look, we need you. You're a great athlete. We know we've been cross training you at safety and playing some nickel. We're going to need you over at cornerback. Just all together, man. I mean, this group, this is about the only position on the field that I think is below group of 5 standard in what we talk about the depth and the playable depth that you have. That being said, you're going to have to find out some competition, some type or some combination of what's going to be able to work for you in a couple Saturdays, because you're facing an Alabama team that is going to rely on the deep ball to beat you. So you're going to have to play good defense on the back end. You're facing a Florida team, which look, I know a lot of people make fun of Florida, but Graham Mertz he's been pretty solid in what they're going to be doing. No, I think Florida's 5-2 heading into this weekend in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party down there in Jacksonville. You have that going on. You're going to play a Georgia State team, which a lot of people don't pay attention to. I do because I had ties back to Atlanta. But it's a Georgia State team that will throw the ball around the yard, and they are, I believe, 6 or 7-1 on the season right now. They just dismantled ULL. 20 minutes, 30 or 20 minutes from, not 20 minutes, but you know what I mean, an hour away from Baton Rouge. And then you have A&M, who it's going to be a potential, you don't know what's going to happen, and you're going to get to the end of the season. So you're going to face 4 teams that can throw the ball on you a little bit and have the ability to throw the football. It isn't going to be an Auburn. It isn't going to be an Army. While there are positive things to take away from the 2 wins that you just got, you also have to be real with yourself that you've got to find some names. So to me, if it was me, if I'm the one painting this picture, I think that Javian Toviano's got to be a guy that steps up in that role. If it's Sage Ryan and Toviano on each side, Ashton Stamps works his way back, okay. But I think just for me personally, I don't want to write off anybody, but if the staff has obviously made a decision. This is not Bryce Koon making this decision of 24/7 Sports. This is the staff of saying, we're trying to go achieve something. If you're not on board, we can't have you weighing us down. And that might be where this group is going with that type of thing, with the 2 guys that have been just deemed inactive, one longer than the other. Whereas we know Denver Harris has had multiple issues trying to get on the football field that really haven't involved necessarily his play. So if that's what it is, I think that's where we're going to have to go from there. Make sure to get your questions in as we round out the last 5 minutes or so of this show. But LSU's DBs, it's going to need some, it's going to be, we're just going to need to see some things. We're going to need to see some things, I think, overall as well. My name is Bryce Koon. Make sure you tune in every single Sunday night. We have a fantastic show that we're going to be rocking and rolling with all the rest of the season. It's been a lot of fun talking with you folks. Let's get to some of these things as well. James, once again, back in the comments. He goes, I noticed for the first time yesterday that Quincy Wiggins got some playing time. Man, that guy fills out a uniform really good. He looks like he can be a dominant player for us in the future. James, it's a great point. I agree with you here. I think Quincy Wiggins, one, has the body type, like you mentioned, of a guy that can continue to be molded in this defensive front. I like him. I think the upside's there. I was impressed with what I saw with him, in the shirt and shorts back in fall camp and in the summer. I think now we're kind of seeing, if he gets a chance, it's going to be very, very interesting. So we go to Edwin Taylor here. We desperately need DTs and cornerbacks for next year. Agreed. I agree with you. I think that, you got to build up depth because you got a lot of guys that can leave along this defensive front. And that's a big reason that this recruiting class, Edwin, that they're bringing in guys, that you obviously have to have. Let's see what the number is on that. I believe it's around. They're trying to bring in 4 or 5 guys. I see them bringing in some stuff in the portal as well that they're going to be able to kind of do as well. Edwin, once again, do you think Matt House returns? I don't think he's the right guy. We need someone who is not only a great DC but a great recruiter. I think it's a It's a real question. I do think because I will say this. I don't really want to speculate necessarily on folks' jobs. I hate to do that. What I will say in this, Edwin, is that the next 4 games are going to tell you a lot because, like I said, you should have dominated Auburn. You should have dominated Army defensively, smothered them. That being said, you're going to learn a lot about Alabama, Florida. If we see another Ole Miss performance defensively, or we see a couple more of those, then I think it's where you can start to have some of those conversations. Just in general about what's going on. So we got Larry here. I know he says they didn't dismantle them. I guess in the sense I was talking about there, Larry, they were up 20 from the passing game perspective. Granger was just really efficient. Sorry in the score. Larry, you're completely right. The final score of that Georgia State Louisiana ULL game, Louisiana Lafayette game, was 20-17. Georgia State was able to squeak out there. But look, that's a 6-1 football team. They can throw the football. Darren Granger's a solid quarterback. He threw for 211, 2 touchdowns, efficient in what they want to do, and they can run the football. So, Larry, thanks for the correction on that. You are right in that. Wanted to get to the last thing we talk about here as we get into this bye week. And it's something for me that was interesting to kind of hear from. And, no banner for this one. We'll just rock and roll with talking about this. LSU is in a very eerily similar position to where they were last year. Let's go down the boxes. Lost to Florida State. Check. Way too many points given up to an SEC team, although in a little bit different fashion. You got blown out by Tennessee last year. You lose, obviously, a heartbreaker to Ole Miss, but you scored a lot. But nevertheless, your defense allowed way too many points against an SEC opponent. Check. Then you get a win that might, I don't want to say turned around the season, and I want to pull up LSU's 2022 schedule here, but a win that you desperately needed. I will say that helped you get the schedule, and it was the very next week against Florida. You went to Florida last year and won 45-35. That one for me, and then obviously you beat Ole Miss, but that one for me was the road game at Missouri, because that was where you were going to learn a lot about the team. So your Florida game last year might have been the Missouri game this year. Ole Miss was obviously a better team than Auburn was, but you come back home, you face an SEC opponent that you need to beat, and you do so in convincing fashion. LSU beat Ole Miss 45-20. That game was close at halftime, but then obviously LSU pulled away. Kind of same situation here where, in the Auburn game, LSU really dominated for what it felt like 3.5, maybe 4 quarters. You then get to the bye week, and you're facing an Alabama team that, Alabama doesn't have the playmakers that they did last year. It's still a Nick Saban coach team. It's still a really, really good football team. And you're faced with 4 games, 3 conference games, and a non-conference game. And you find yourself similar situation where you still have a chance to go to Atlanta and compete for an SEC title. So all of that being said, I do believe that there's obviously a path, but I do agree with what Brian Kelly talked about. You can check out my article latest on the Go 24/7 page as well. Make sure you check that out. Link down in the bio below to check us out, all the written content over at 247sports.com. Because this group postgame has kind of downplayed the similarities of last year to this year. And I like the mentality. You can't rely on what that group did last year. It's different players. It's new faces, even some new coaches in that sense. What you can do is the guys that went through it, they've been there before. They know what it's like to play with their backs against a wall. So, yes, you're not obviously going to be able to give the same rah-rah speeches, give the same type of advice that maybe you gave, because it's a different group. But some of the leaders of this team, and Josh Williams was one of those guys that we talked to post-game, and he mentioned this, it's about the process. So is the process of how they go about it going to be similar? Maybe in some ways. Maybe this group responds in different ways. I don't know. I'm not inside the locker room. But what I do think here is that you can't piggyback off what this group did last year to make a run here in the latter half of the season. I think that we're going to see LSU. We're going to learn a lot, in 2 weeks. And I think this bye week comes at a perfect time. We talked about some of the nicks and cuts that this group has, some of the bumps and bruises as they try to continue on throughout this season. They got to get healthy. and they've got to roll into Tuscaloosa full force because we'll tell you this. Facing a Nick Saban, it doesn't happen often. Facing a Nick Saban-led Alabama team that's looking for revenge in Tuscaloosa, it's not an easy task. This is a different Alabama team, I'll give you that. But I think this is going to be a very, very good football game that's going to be played in Tuscaloosa. And I like that this group isn't just saying, well, we did it last year, because you can't count on that. I agree with that. And I like that mentality. But Josh Williams, obviously one of the, I think best representatives of not only just this football team, but as LSU as an institution in general. I really like what Josh Williams is about. And he talked about that. He straight up said you can find more of that conversation over on our website. That is 247sports.com/college/LSU, or just type in Go 24/7, GEAUX. 24/7. You can find myself. My name is Bryce Koon, Glenn West, our senior writer, Sonny Ship, covering everything recruiting, or Dylan Sanders as well, hopping in with a couple things each and every single week. Hope you enjoy your bye week. Hope you enjoy what was a fantastic atmosphere at that Army game too. I know it was a blowout. Fans left early. I get it. But man, you talk about the pageantry of college football. You talk about what makes college football special, the traditions. LSU already has that. Inviting a team like Army in there and the Service Academy to being able to honor them was something very, very special as well. We will catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast. We appreciate you. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to give us a like. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, completely free. If you're on Facebook or Twitter and you're saying, hey, I want to be a part of this, it's really easy. Head over to YouTube, subscribe to the channel, or follow, like, wherever you're following this. If you're listening after the fact on Monday morning or throughout the week, as you enjoy the bye week, you enjoy time with family or friends, we appreciate you as well. Make sure to subscribe to that feed, whether that's Google Podcasts, whether that's Apple, or whether Spotify, or wherever you may be getting this podcast. My name is Bryce Koon. Thanks so much for tuning in. This has been another episode